Good afternoon. I'm Jason Seals, your host. This is A Moment of Truth. I'm here today with Dr. James Taylor. He is a professor over at USF. He's a scholar, a father, a community activist. And so today we're going to have a really important discussion around Black leadership. So first question, in your opinion, just in your research, just as a person in the community, like, what is the state of Black America right now?
That's a great question, Jason. The National Urban League every year puts out an update on what the state of Black America is on a number of scales: economic, jobs, health, a general perception of how Black people feel about their position in society and progress. And to be quite frank with you, the norm is a condition of distress. And every once in a while, we have breakthrough moments that make us feel like progress is being made.
Wow.
So for me, Martin Luther King and Barack Obama, or even any kind of Black optimism, is really an extension of the mundane reality that Black people are pitted in a situation with a hostile white majority perpetually. And I think that when you talk about the state of Black America, it's always under distress. It's never good. Individuals like us might be able to make some headway, but the general condition of Black people, and again, I'm not qualifying for class and gender and things of that sort, globally, is one that is on fire. And being that Black Americans at the heart of, the corporate capital, power in the world, we're in the belly of the beast, as John Singleton said in one of his films. And as a consequence, Black America is almost a litmus test for the world. We're a hypothesis. If you were to say, in other words, the Black situation is unique compared to all other people on the planet, and people don't appreciate that. And Cornel West says this in his book on Prophesied Deliverance. He talks about the fact that Black people are caught in this situation in America with white people who are themselves incomplete, Europeans. So they're constantly telling us we're not Africans, but we're amongst the people. So the double consciousness dynamic, Cornel West says, for Black America is complicated by a third dynamic, and that is the lack of culture and Europeanness amongst whites. And so what they do is shape their cultural identity vis-a-vis Black and brown people and poor people to make themselves better than they would be, or make themselves seem more aristocratic in relationship to old Europe. So I argue again and again that racism in America helps even the low order or lower state of whites imagine that they are aristocrats. And so Black people in America are in a perpetual state of war. And I don't mean to be hyperbolic in that statement, but it's like everybody's at war with Black America, and Black America is busy sending out Christian love to everybody else. And at some point, you have to, there's going to be a Malcolm X or Huey type turn in Black consciousness, because the violence we're seeing at many levels from individuals, vigilantes, and law enforcement and the state is unsustainable.
Right. So what do we do about that? Like, what should be our collective response? Because you said distress. When you said that resonated with me. And you said always, right? And I think you uplifted this point, which I think is important, is that individually, some of us will do just fine. But if we're talking about collectively, that's a different conversation. What should be our response?
I think that Black people have to first accept that reality, that they are in a perpetual state of racism. We're not in capitalism. We're not in a country. We're in a racism, if that makes sense. In other words, we're in a condition of racism perpetually because no other people on the planet, no white population on the planet lives with 45 million Black people going up to 75 million in the next 25 years. Not Brazil.
Right.
South Africa is the one example, but the Blacks are the majority. Australia might be the only real parallel with the Aborigine being overwhelmed by the white Australians. Otherwise, nowhere on the planet do black people live with a majority of white people. Nowhere. So when you start talking about coming here as an African or West Indian, like some of these new Negroes are quick to put down black American culture, it's like, go back to where you're from and let us come with you, and we will see the condition you come from when you come here and then you put down black American culture. No culture has been able to sustain itself for 400 years under these hostile conditions, not even the original culture. So when you think about the distress that black America has been in perpetual, again, because of this is Harold Cruz. This is not even my thinking.
Yeah.
This is Harold Cruz in The Crisis of the Negro Intellectual, Rebellion versus Revolution. He basically says that black American leadership has never come to the basic reality, the fundamental reality that Africa is living in America with Europe. And when you reconcile that America is a place where Europe and Africa have met to coexist, it is as impossible as that hypothesis. So the hypothesis of black life is, what would happen to a people if you were to take 80 million of them from their original land under hostile conditions, make them walk 3,000 miles in the interland, get them to the coast, put them on boats, send them across the Atlantic for the next 200 years, then put them in slavery, in a perpetual condition of slavery, abnormal slavery compared to anything Europe has ever known, and then hold them in that condition where they are easy to identify by color.
Right.
So that in reality is when black people, in essence, are almost like living in an alien environment, like as if aliens came and took humans to another planet. That's the reality of black people. That is the black reality in the world, is that we were taken by aliens and brought to another land. That's how crazy black situation is. It would be as if Martians, I know I sound crazy, but it would be like as if Martians came and just took all the humans back to Mars and said, now survive, humans, instead of nigger. Survive, humans, and then learn our language, learn our religion, learn our economic system, learn our ways. And then not only do you not get an opportunity to figure that out in a non-hostile environment, but you got to do it with the whip and the chain, and your family being broken up. No other population on the planet could survive what black America has endured. Not the native population, not any other population. And that is why I think the question of black America's perpetual state of racism is bigger than any incident. So any incident of racism, Michael Brown being shot, Trayvon Martin being shot, these are real horrors. But the overarching reality... You're saying
the landscape.
The landscape of being black in the world
is far greater.
Unprecedented. And nobody from outside of no black people who come here or other non-whites should come here with a condescending attitude toward black Americans, because we have not only endured, we have thrived under these conditions and have done better than most other groups would have done, including the white group itself is doing in many cases. In 33 of 50 states in America, I'll say it again, in 33 of 50 states in America, the white population is dying out. Its birth rates are not keeping up with its death rates in most of America. Meanwhile, black America's population is going from 45 to 75 million, and you got people running around here talking about genocide of black America. No, black America is thriving. Now, problem is, to get back to your original question, is what do we do with this? How do we address these issues? And that's where I think you end up with a change in black philosophy. I think we need to come back to what the Panthers came to understand later in their mission was it was all about Oakland. And that's what it should have always been about. It should have never been about the Panthers trying to lead the black movement revolutionarily across the country, because Oakland's black population arrived in 1943. Philadelphia's in 1700. New York's in 1700. The Boston black community, the original Masons, 1787. The black church, the AME church, was being born the same summer in Philadelphia when the Constitution was being born. So the reality is that black Americans are a nation within a nation. And I think what the Panthers made a mistake of doing was trying to lead the Black nation when they should have just led Black Oakland, and they got that later. They figured it out that we can't lead Detroit.
Right.
Detroit got its own movement around auto industry, the Revolutionary Black Workers, RAM, and other organizations. Then you had old activists in Harlem, old activists in Baltimore, old activists in Philly. All these old Black communities were there. People don't recognize that West Coast Black politics are only 60 years old. They are a baby in the scheme of things.
Right.
I'm not talking about Mary. I'm not talking about William. I'm not talking about what's his name, Leinsdorf or Mary Ellen Pleasant. I'm not trying to dismiss them. In the 18th century and 19th century Black leaders in San Francisco, they were important. But I'm trying to help people understand that when you try to understand West Coast Black politics, they're only 50 years old.
So I hear you saying...
Between Black Power in 66, Black folk arrived in 43.
Right. I hear you saying a few different things. I don't uplift these things. I hear you saying that because of where we're at, we're under a lot of distress. That the political landscape in itself is harmful to us.
Yes.
And so it's greater than just specific incidents.
That's right.
And I also hear you saying that we have to have a specific political agenda to address these things. I'm curious, what is that political agenda?
Yeah.
Like, is the political agenda just racism? And is it more difficult if we go beyond racism? And the reason why I say that is because I think if we go pre-60s, pre-integration, we know that there was a central focus on bettering the quality of life, and some of us are really attached to this idea of integration, right? The integration would change our quality of life. And so I think that it didn't matter if you were in Detroit, it didn't matter if you were in California, it didn't matter if you were in New York, there was a synergy around one target. And now I feel like we have multiple targets. And so does it make the political agenda more difficult if it's beyond racism?
No, I think it's an outstanding question. I think the proliferation of fronts, if you will, in Black life requires that we come out of all of that chaos and become more focused, meaning that the internet, social media, that everybody has a voice now. Tariq Nasheed, everybody, the Addos people, everybody has a voice now. Martin Luther King could not succeed in today's leadership environment where he's the voice, because the internet means that everybody has a voice equivalent to Martin Luther King's. So I don't necessarily, if I understand your question right, to me, the reality of the proliferation of issues, and then the intra-Black group dynamic around gender, sexuality, and class, I think was something that was lost in the first epic of Black movement that was all covered by, like you say, a race-only agenda. Race-only agenda of the Black agenda covers a multitude of Black sins. Gender, sexuality, inequality around class. But the real struggle, and I think the real polarization in Black politics now is around gender. Because of the way in which Black women and LGBTQ people have been marginalized in the Black modern movement, they're now saying, we want to have our moment. And it's almost reckless in some ways, in the sense that it's almost like we ain't taking no Black men with us. It's almost like sisters are number one, Black girl dangerous. And it's almost like they have learned the lessons from bell hooks and others, and then ran wild with it. Because in my view, Black womanism, Black feminism, Black womanists like Ella Baker and say Fannie Lou Hamer, they were not down with this intersectional analysis that everyone offers up as a real thing. Fannie Lou Hamer is on social media saying, my husband's 6'2", his feet are 11, and he got an 11 and a half size shoe, his pants is 36 waist. She talks about his shirt size, and Fannie Lou Hamer says, I love every inch of that Black man and don't want no separation from him. In the last 30 years, and Cruz talks about this, the emergence of feminist discourses is greater than the division between Black, say, middle class and Black poor in the 50s and 60s. And so after Black Power, Black feminist analysis and critiques were that it was all a dick thing, as Bella Hooks likes to call it. which I think is a total misreading. I've been here in the Bay Area for 20 years. I've been on numerous panels with black women Panthers, and they all acknowledged that there was some sexism, but none of them were guided and directed by the sexism as their political fight within the Black Panther movement or the Black Power movement. Sisters were leading the movement in their own right, Septima Clark and Diane Nash and many others. And there's a book called At the Dark End of the Street that documents that for black women, the civil rights movement was all about rape only. It was not about accommodation.
So let me ask you a question really quickly, and this is kind of off topic, but you brought something up that Michael Eric Dyson, you know, he does an interesting analysis of Malcolm X in his book here called Making Malcolm, the Myth and the Meaning of Malcolm X. And he in here says something that triggered me as I was reading it. He alludes to Malcolm being sexist. Yeah. And you just brought that up, and that's why I wanted to go there. Yeah. What are your thoughts about that? Because that profoundly kind of disturbed me.
Well, because I say this in my book. My book is Black Nationalism in the United States from Malcolm X to Barack Obama. And I argue in that book that in many ways the feminist and the sort of discourse around gender underestimates the extent to which black men are gender oppressed, first and foremost. Black men are gender oppressed. Emmett Till. Lynchings and emasculations, castrations were about black male gender. So if intersectionality analysis is going to be serious, it has to incorporate black men's predicament and their realities, as well as their sexism. Right. So if you want to talk about Malcolm being a sexist, let's talk about, the ways in which scholars have looked at Malcolm and questioned his sexuality. We have Professor Wood, who's now gone, and Manning Marable, who's now gone, basically making Malcolm into a prostitute, a male prostitute, in the streets of Harlem in order to reconcile him with present-day politics. And I find that problematic. Yeah. So when Dyson talks about Malcolm being a sexist, I think it's Dyson being like the typical black comedian going into the room full of a bunch of black women saying, "Oh, ain't the sisters in here fine tonight?" I just think it's playing the audience with Dyson. I think Dyson is simply doing what comedians do. "Oh, isn't everybody out here cute tonight? Aren't the women out here beautiful tonight?" And they all start clapping. "Yay, yeah, thank you for calling us beautiful." Dyson is just giving a shout out, necessarily calling Malcolm X sexist, not even acknowledging that Malcolm was a man of his own times. And this is why I say in my book that at some point after 25, 35 years of teaching, black feminist discourses have to at some point recognize that some men get it. Yeah. And if we don't, then damn. Yeah. Of course we have some other things going on, but to reduce Malcolm to a sexist without contextualizing that it was a generational phenomenon, that you're younger than me, your attitudes about women are different than mine. Absolutely. You're 20 years different than mine. Mine is 20 years different than Malcolm's. Yeah. So it's like progress is being made. Feminism and these intersectional discourses have been very powerful and forceful. But the idea that Malcolm was a sexist, again, is to me anachronism or reading history out of time. The strong sexism that Bell Hooks is reacting to was largely a generational phenomenon of World War II era men. King, Malcolm, that was their culture. Huey, Eldridge. Yeah. And feminism has disciplined men in the past 30 to 40 years, 30 to 40 years, in ways that we cannot be as piggish. Of course, we see piggishness at the national level of government, but everyday brothers, you can't write a book that is purely sexist today and get away with it. I can't give a speech and just downgrade women today without consequences. Right. So that's progress. When you talk about Malcolm being a sexist, I'm willing to say he was a sexist like other men of his generation were sexist at the time. The World War II, Great Society, nuclear family, the Moynihan Report. And maybe that was true. Maybe that's what he was uplifting. Maybe Dyson was simply just saying that he was a sexist like the many other men of that time period. My question would just be, why is that even relevant in the text of talking about the man? Yeah. But I think the pieces you bring up are so important because I do think we're dealing with a spectrum of issues. And the spectrum of issues somewhat cast a shadow over our politics and how we deal with them. I think people do want to be seen. I think what they're bringing up is real and relevant.
I just struggle with how we deal with it if we're talking about the state of Black America, and I want to throw in, like, what does today's leadership look like? Because you brought up this interesting point around voice. Everybody has a voice. And I'm somewhat baffled because I think that we've gotten voice confused with leadership.
Good point. Excellent.
Everybody has there's a lot of voices out there. So how do we deal with that in the midst of we have issues?
Yeah. I mean, we write and we study and we're reading, and I'm not trying to, be arrogant about it. But then somebody decides to wake up this morning and tweet something, and they get 50,000 likes, and you sitting here reading books and writing books and all up in this literature and scholarship, and you tweet something and nobody responds.
Yeah.
That's the magic of being young with the internet today, the social media, knowing the right words. Half the time when I see stuff on social media, I mean, like, okay, that word, what is it? What did he say to her? And how come everybody, and I'll be wanting to go back to my wife, like, how come everybody understands what this means except me? Because there be words that I can't understand. I'm like, damn, am I that old? But I think, the social media dynamic gives people many different voices, and it undermines the voice of a coherent Black leadership, and that's good in a lot of ways. But I think we learned in Occupy that the failure to have an articulate leadership with a particular voice and a particular agenda eventually will cause the movement to fade. I think people underestimate this notion that we have, what do they say? We have not a leader, they use the word that democratizes leadership. They have leaders, or they call it not leadership, something that says there's no one leader, there are many. And there's a problem with having too many leaders and not one.
Do we have leadership today? In 2019, do we have that? And I want to be transparent. I think so if we go back to Du Bois, okay, some people during his time period would have considered him on the precipice, right, of anything that was advancing our quality of life, okay? But I don't know if we look at people in 2019 as we look at Du Bois. And I'm not sure if anyone has had that impact. And I just say this because Michael Eric Dyson often gets brought up in the conversation of Black leadership. So does Cornel West. I just want to be clear, not to negate anyone's influence, but these are scholars.
Yeah.
And so are we saying scholars, historians, are they leaders?
I don't think so. I think they are workers, employees doing their job, trying to keep food on their tables, and are laborers. But I think when you start looking for the voices that are influential, it's whatever's plugged in terms of technology, the phones, podcasts like this. Social media in general. Twitter gives people an ongoing voice on a daily basis to say whatever you want to say and put it out there. So I think the notion of leadership as we inherited it, going back, I think begins with Harriet Tubman, in my view. I think Harriet Tubman is God, in my view. So you might think I'm a sexist. I literally believe that Harriet Tubman was the greatest human being to ever live. I really believe that. I don't believe that King or Gandhi or Mother Teresa should be mentioned in the name of Harriet Tubman. That's how much I venerate Harriet Tubman, the greatest leader of all time. Because it all began with her. All of the original Black leadership style was not a male thing. And this is why I say, when you start talking feminist discourses and Black discourses and intersectional discourses, you got to think twice. The first Black leader was not a man. Universally, the first Moses, at least, was Harriet Tubman. Universally adored.
Yes.
In Black America.
Absolutely.
She was ready to fight down. She was in her 70s, ready to go to war with John Brown in 1859 to overthrow the Harper's Ferry situation, and just didn't show up that day. But she was down for it. Harriet Tubman, to me, provided the model of leading Black people from freedom on a micro level.
Right.
But her reputation resounds in such a way that Frederick Douglass, a guy named Charles Remond out of Boston, who was working with William Lloyd Garrison, Sojourner Truth, and others began to articulate and emerge and say, well, we got voices too.
Right.
So it's kind of weird. It's like social media is doing today what the abolitionist movement did for black people back then. And what most people don't recognize is that the abolitionist movement was a black American initiated movement. Our white friends, William Lloyd Garrison, I wish I had time to break this down. William Lloyd Garrison was a white man that believed that black people should go back to Africa, and he was willing to support colonization, as it was called, through the American Colonization Society, which was supported by Jefferson and everybody else up to Lincoln across 90 years. They created Liberia right after the British created Sierra Leone. And the American Colonization Society was to send blacks back to Africa.
Right.
That was the original white abolitionist position.
Absolutely.
Let's be clear. The original white abolitionist position was back to Africa. It was blacks in Boston who were paying for William Lloyd Garrison's newspaper that said, man, until you change your attitude, we will not fund you. The whites were not funding him.
Right.
Black people funded the abolitionist movement. Black people were the ones who were behind the Underground Railroad. These were our institutions, not movements like, we're going through this now, we're going to stop. Black people created this underground route from Alabama, Mississippi, all the way up to Canada. And King later says that Canada was the North Star to black folk. And so the reason why I'm iterating this is that black people don't even own the Underground Railroad, Jason.
Right.
We done got brainwashed not to even embrace the Underground Railroad as one of our movements like the Civil Rights Movement or the Harlem Renaissance or the New Negro Movement. But the abolitionist movement and Underground Railroad were our institutions.
Right.
And there's a church in Savannah, Georgia, where the slaves hid. They hid them up under the. I don't know if you all saw that, but they hid them. They had these at the African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. They have these floors, and the floors were removable because they would put the people up under the slaves up under them.
Right.
And to this day, this is on YouTube. You can find it. They had these mysterious markings that the Africans would put throughout the building that nobody can interpret what they meant. But black folk, were, I think, from the very beginning, trying to figure out how to survive in a very hostile world and a hostile society perpetually.
I think what you were talking about is really important in terms of black leadership. Harriet being the model of that black leadership, and you mentioned Septima Clark. You've mentioned Fannie Lou Hamer. We got to throw Ella Jo Baker in there.
Absolutely.
These are black women that were the models of leadership. Where has that leadership shifted? Because right now, what I brought up to you is I've talked about our scholars, but we also we still have folks in the clergy, and for a long time, the folks in the clergy were considered leaders. You brought up some of the movements, which I'm glad you used the term movement around the Black Arts Movement, around Harlem Renaissance. Folks talk about the Harlem Renaissance like it's a art infused time period. Art was used as a tool, right, to create a political platform from Africans to change their quality of life, rehabilitation. We can go there. But I think, I'm just curious, where has that leadership gone?
Yeah. I think if you look, it's there.
It's there.
It's shifted, though. I think we have to put away the old model, as I said, of a leader, the leader, but you do need leadership representation and spokespeople, of course. To me, it has something to do with just sort of looking at how new technology, again, has created all of these different voices. So you can't have like I said, you can't have a Martin Luther King or a Malcolm X. Malcolm X and King could not make it in today's black politics.
That's so
Think about it. If Malcolm came
up
up and spoke today, anybody could tweet and say Malcolm X got his high waters on today. And then a bunch of idiot people will laugh and like it and be like, ooh, look at Malcolm X's high waters today. Because Malcolm would wear white socks or black shoes sometime, right? Malcolm couldn't do that today without being laughed off the internet. And that's what I'm saying. It's almost this
it's hard to hear that,
gaze.
though.
It's a black gaze that we call black Twitter that now disciplines anything that, whether it's Candace Owens or Donald Trump or Jesse or Al or Black Lives Matter, there's this reality. But one of the things I want to bring out is that black women are leading in terms of Democratic Party politics.
Got you.
And I think that's what we need to not confuse Black Girl Dangerous with, or Beyonce's revolution with being good Democrats. That's what everybody's happy about. I went to a conference recently, and a good friend of mine was in a room on a panel on black women, and she was bragging about black women being number one, black women being number one, black girl dangerous. And I appreciate this. I had a mother and sisters and a wife and children, a daughter. But I'm thinking black women are number one for what? To helping buttress the Democratic Party. So y'all want us to get excited about you buttressing a party that largely takes us for granted and has for 50 to 60 years because you're being loyal Democrats. That ain't black. That's a kind of black politics, but party politics is not enough.
So you're saying that our leadership must go beyond organized politics.
I think we have so many fronts, so much black talent. We have 10,000 Martin Luther Kings now. We got 20,000 Thurgood Marshalls. All the black lawyers in America.
Yeah.
We got 20,000 economists and scientists and we have way more brilliant people who have taken advantage of their ancestors knocking these doors down for them than ever. And so the question is, why are we still stuck? And it has to do, I think, with the overall slavish mentality of integration. I think integration,
is that what it is?
I think integration causes the individual black person to measure their success as black people's success.
Let's think about this. So what you're saying, I think, is really important because I want to uplift that we had Thurgood, Malcolm, Martin. We can throw.
Ella Baker, anybody.
Well, hold on. We could throw Stokely Carmichael in there,
That's
right? All these black men were alive at the same time,
and we still got more talent today.
We can go Medgar Evers.
Yep.
With all these men of African ancestry, how come they couldn't get into the room together?
I think because there were so many different dynamics, internal and external to the movement. I think things were poorly defined. Again, this is Monday morning quarterbacking in hindsight and 2 generations away.
But isn't that parallel to what you're saying right now?
Yeah.
Like we have all of these folks, but we have so many issues that still need to be addressed. It's, to me, having Medgar Evers and Stokely and Martin and Malcolm and Thurgood, to me, that was they had different audience they were addressing.
That's right.
Right? They had,
and that's what they didn't do. They didn't learn how to coexist with their differences. Howard Cruz didn't need the nationalists to become an integrationist and the integrationists to become a nationalist. Howard Cruz wanted the integrationists and the nationalists to work side by side with each other in a hostile environment. He wanted Malcolm and King or Du Bois and Booker or, say, Garvey and Du Bois to work together.
Right.
But and he didn't see them as antithetical. He thought integration and nationalism under American conditions could be operationalized politically, but only at the local level.
Right.
Cruz said basically by 1986 in the book Plural But Equal, if we had not, by the year 2000 as a black people in America, he said this in 1986 about 2000, he said if we have not come together in some kind of independent fulcrum or entity by the year 2000, then black politics has reached a dead end. And then he talked about gender and sexuality dynamics, kind of taking it from there. So, until we figure out a new avenue or a new route to continue the mobilization of the black quest for universal freedom, we're going to be stuck focusing on idiots like Candace Owens or the next Zip Coon Negro they can come up with. I want to clarify here on your show that Uncle Tom was not a sellout. I want people to understand Uncle Tom died protecting his family, that Uncle Tom was no sellout, and we need to recover Uncle Tom because it was the Garveyites who didn't want to be associated with the Christian, long-suffering image of Uncle Tom, and the new Negro basically was the new Negro was basically saying, no more Uncle Tom. Now we're new Negroes.
Right.
So the new Negro was a revolution against Uncle Tom.
Right.
But it was Garvey and them in New Negro movement that turned Uncle Tom into a sellout. And people like me who know the history, or Sterling Stuckey, who died recently at UC Riverside, who knows the history, argues effectively that Uncle Tom was actually revolutionary.
Right.
That he was murdered because he would not sell his people out.
Right.
And then when Legree is beating him to death, he says, you poor miserable fool. And then he goes on to his death. Somehow from that, he becomes Uncle Tom. No, the real Negro that's sold out is Zip Coon.
Gotcha.
And all of these, black conservatives, black moderates, Kanye West, Candace Owens, some of the black Republicans who are co-signing on this racism at the national level of government, these are Zip Coon black people, capital ZIP Coons. And that is part of the dynamic. But that's also a part of the proliferation of all these voices. We've always had all these voices. We've always had anti-black black voices. There's a book
Say that
called,
again.
Yeah,
Say that again. We've always had anti-black voices. It's important to bring that point.
Yeah, the most famous of them is a
forefront.
man named William Hannibal Thomas. If you look him up, Google him, and it's a book called Black Judas, and it tells his story. This Negro hated himself so much he might as well have been a racist white man with a Klan hat on. And Shelby Steele is a modern black person like that, and you have others. And so for me, I think the reality is we need people like you to help us understand what should be done next, because two big things that I want to put before us to consider before we think about what we can do with it is, one, as I suggested, the black population is exploding.
Got you. So change that narrative.
That's it. We're not being wiped out.
You
We're
said
actually
it twice. That's an important narrative.
From 45 to 75 million in your lifetime.
Got you.
By the time you're an old man, your grandkids going to be the majority.
Okay.
That's why they're tripping out about, that's why they're losing it this way. But I think it's also important to understand, along with that pattern of population increase, is the black population from the baby boomers, millennials, civil rights generation, what's left of it, which is the baby boomer generation, and the hip hop generation. The last three black generations are moving back south.
Right.
So black folk are growing in population and moving back south.
Reverse migration.
That's it. And it's been going on since 1970.
Yeah.
So 49 years black folk have been moving back south, and now we're calling it out migration. But they stopped in San Francisco. 1970 came, the black population growth stopped in San Francisco and around black America. Black folk was like, nah, this dream of the North ain't no dream, and it's not all they're making it out to be. So people decided to go back home. And so my point to you is, whatever the future of black politics is, needs to factor in the reality of black population increase and black relocation and out-migration, as you call it. And you see some manifestations of it. You just had Stacey Abrams win governor of Georgia and have it stolen by this devil that stole it. And Gillum nearly won Florida. Black folk took over, and there's still some real problems in Memphis. Recently, I read in the news that almost undermine what I'm about to say. But if you check what happened in Shelby County in Memphis, where Memphis is, black folk took over the whole county. They took 21 of 26 seats, including the mayor and the head police seat. So black folk have real power in Shelby County, Mississippi, where Martin Luther King was murdered. But if you in the hood, you don't feel it.
I think this is the piece that's so important to me, is that, you know, the politics platform is one platform. You bring that up. You brought up this idea around voices, that there's so many voices. How do we deal with this leading blacks versus black leaders? And I want to give you how I define it and how I see it, and you clarify for me your perception. But we have a lot of what I consider to be leading blacks. These are black folk that might be influential. They might be artists. They might be actors. They might be, scholars. But they have a platform. And unfortunately, I think it's to our demise that we see them as leaders.
Interesting.
Right? Now, I also know that if I go back in history, you can go to the Black Arts Movement, Harlem Renaissance. We've always had this relationship to artists, to musicians, and we've in a political sense. But I'm not sure we've always wanted them to be what you referred to earlier, like the monolithical national leader. Right? We have now a LeBron James opened up a school, a LeBron James that speaks out on injustice more so than a Michael Jordan. He's kind of following the Jim Brown, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar pathway in terms of being active and being an activist. I'm not sure, to me, he's a black leader.
Interesting,
Right? And this is just me, and this is no chastising of LeBron James. When I envision a leader, I'm not sure that's a black leader. Opening up a black school does not make you a black leader. Right. I think it's a very profound thing to do, and I think we need more black people funding black education. Right. That's black liberation. So I applaud that. But these voices, right? You brought up Tariq. You know, people have brought up
Yvette Carnell is this other person,
right? There's these who's the other brother that's on
Umar Johnson.
Umar Johnson, right?
I knew you had to be talking about
these people are saying
the brother
these
be in the
are
room by himself yelling at his phone, Black Power, Pan-Africanism, give me the money for that school. I'm like, dude, where's your woman and where's your kids? And why you gonna tell me how to be a father and a black man and a man when you in the room yelling at your phone by yourself? I have a real problem with people that sit in the room on social media talking about how beautiful they are and how bad they are and that's what I'm talking about. It's like this cheap leadership. All you gotta do is have a damn phone and you a leader.
But that's my question. It's like, how do we address this? I think we have more leading blacks than black leaders. So if you're a black leader, to me, you are leading institutions.
Yeah, that's the difference I see too.
Changing the quality of life.
Yep.
Your influence is greater than just social influence. Yep. And this is taboo, and I'm gonna say it, and I know people are listening, people are watching it. But there are two families you cannot talk about in Black America without backlash. The Obamas and the Carters.
Interesting.
Right?
You mean the Jay-Z and Beyonce?
Yes.
Interesting. That's true.
Right? I don't care if you're in a barbershop. I don't care if you're in the education.
That's
You
right.
cannot talk about those two families. And the reason why I bring that up is because Jay-Z and Beyonce often get spoken about like they're black leadership. I think they're black influencers.
Yeah.
I think they make good social impact. I think what Jay-Z has done to change his life and what Beyonce has done, I think is commendable. I just question, is that black leadership? And so when I say this, leading blacks versus black leadership, how do we deal with this paradigm?
Yeah. No, I think that's really an excellent point, and it really addresses the question of this sort of multi-fronted proliferation of voices. Once again, the leading black versus black leaders dynamic. I agree with you. Black leaders, as you were talking about, I kept thinking, well, the difference for me is institutions. The black leaders attached to institutions more than the leading black, and that's pretty much the black church or other institutions, formal institutions like the Greek society and black community. But a leading black person to me is somebody today that is able to use any technology to get a following, to get likes. And that's how it's measured today. You have people who get liked on social media. They get so popular that the national media begins to recognize them. And next thing you know, they're on TV as a voice and a representative. You got Simone Sanders with the formerly Bernie campaign, now with the Biden campaign. Every time Biden says something racist from 40 years ago or has to fix some racism from 40 years ago, they pull her out, and she's trying to tell Black America what to think. What I do know is that Black America is a thing. And there is a place.
Absolutely.
And there is a thing. No matter how much people try to trouble blackness and the black community as definitional categories, they still prevail. Under these racist American conditions, you will never be able to not be able to define the black community because, as I told you before, the big thing in the room is black people are living next to white people, which doesn't happen anywhere else in the world on this scale. And so for that reason, to me, voting is one front, the Democratic Party is one front, and that's where people think our black leaders are. It's like, who's leading our black politics in terms of party politics and TV politics and CNN and Fox News and MSNBC politics? But if you're talking to brothers and sisters down here in the flatlands in Oakland, they respect more of the local brothers on the streets. They respect more of these local institutions like here in Oakland, where you have at the Oakland Recs and Park centers where, like down at Willie Keys, people are fed on a daily basis, where food is provided for elders and many of them not even from the black community. I think leading blacks are people, like you say, are of influence. To me, black leaders are folk that are committed to black people till they die. You just don't go through a phase. Like, I get irritated as an older man now when I see people going through what I see as fads. Like, you into this shit now, excuse my language, because you're young and you revolutionary now. But when you get 45, you're going to turn white and conservative like everybody else. Where's all the 60s revolutionaries? Right. Where's all them hippies from the 60s? They were supposed to lead the revolution. They in charge now.
Now, but could
we still begging for reparations.
Right.
We asking the hippies for reparations.
Right. Could there be a shift? I mean, so Fabulous and Jadakiss has a song called Talk About It. And in there, Fabulous calls out actors, athletes. He's saying, y'all need to do more. Could they do more? And if they do more, is that a form of leadership?
I don't think they should have to do any more than any other group of Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, the disabled, LGBTQ for their so-called, communities, theoretically and philosophically. But, and again, in the reality of under American conditions, black people are accustomed to black spokespersons and leaders of different sorts. That's the method we chose as a means to our politics. And that, I think, is what people have to recognize, is that black people chose these means. This might be tangential, but black people chose Christianity as a part of their politics. It wasn't because of religion. They didn't choose Christianity because they loved Jesus. Black people were in America for 400 years, and none of them were Christians. This is bullcrap that black people were taught Christianity as slaves. Malcolm lied about that. The Nation of Islam lied about that. Black people rejected Christianity in America for 250 years. Black people who were slaves always rejected Christianity. The blacks who became Christians were the elites, the few that joined the abolitionist movement, the people that were educated by the churches like Du Bois and Alexander Crummell and others. But this has very little to do with the reality of black people in terms of ordinary black politics. And so for me, we've had 20 generations of white people who have not been revolutionary. We could keep trying to find black leaders and black voices and distinguish between leading blacks and black leaders. The truth is, white people have never had a revolutionary commitment to black people's freedom. We've been here for over 25 generations. There's not been one generation of white people that we can point to who actually were serious about black people's liberation. Not one. The abolitionists, as I already told you, we brought them along. We had to tell William Lloyd Garrison, change your attitude or your whole movement dies. We will kill it. That's what they told him. And he stopped and changed his mind. So I think when you look at the fact that 20 generations of white people have just run their mouths, and half that part that hasn't hated, the other part has said, oh, eventually we'll get there. And here we are almost going into the 22nd century in a few years, and still dealing with 14th century racism. This is 15th century we're dealing with Donald Trump. Talking about the Gang of Four or the Squad sisters. Or talking about Elijah Cummings, and then his house was just broken into, I think, yesterday or today, and the President of the United States woke up this morning and celebrated the breaking in Baltimore to Maya and Elijah Cummings' home. And so, again, white people chose Donald Trump. 63 million majority white people chose Donald Trump. And they have to ask themselves, those who voted for him, what do they think is going to happen? What do they think is going to happen? Do you think black people are just going to let y'all do this?
Right.
Do you think at some point there's not going to be a black power reaction? There will be at some point when black people decide on their terms that they've had enough.
Yeah.
What Micah X did in Dallas.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to manage it, because black people have been tolerating a lot of this pressure, and I think it will manifest itself in some ways that people cannot anticipate just yet.
Two things. One, so if you're saying that these black athletes, actors, entertainers aren't necessarily philosophically, as you say, required to do more, what is their role? Yeah. One. And then two, how do we begin to cultivate black leadership? I'm at a point where I'm constantly thinking about black leadership, and as a classroom instructor, and you brought this up earlier, as a classroom instructor that teaches African American studies, Africana studies, black people in large are yearning for a leader, and I believe it's the monolithical. They want Malcolm again, right? We have a lot of grassroots leaders. We still got some preachers and some imams. We have the big mamas. We got the grassroots. We still have leaders out there. How do we cultivate it? Like, where is that next wave coming from?
See, Jason, for me, because I Have a Dream was so big, it didn't do anything. It didn't fit nowhere. King told me I have a dream. And he from Atlanta, where Black Atlanta was happy being Black Atlanta and did not want to integrate with the rest of America. The Panthers talking about Black power here in Oakland, trying to make it fit all over America. Part of the problem is these one-size-fits-all remedies for the Black situation, which is a bunch of different situations with parallels. Racism is across the board for all of us as Black people, especially if we're poor. So that's the connection. But the idea that the solution of Oakland's problems can be solved with New York solutions, or New York Black problems can be solved with Detroit solutions, is what happened when the Panthers and Karenga and all of these other groups like the Revolutionary Armed Action Movement and the Nation of Islam started shooting and killing each other. Instead of all of them staying in their lane. That's my answer to your question. The development of the future of Black and cultivating Black leadership is you here in Oakland, here at this institution, developing young people at this institution. That's where you are most effective. You trying to, out of this circumstance, be a leader in Connecticut, for example. You know what I'm saying? That's what the Panthers were trying to do. It's like, okay, y'all over in Oakland trying to lead in Connecticut. Don't nobody in Connecticut know you. They agree with you because they're dealing with the same issues in Connecticut. Stay in Oakland and develop Oakland. And the Panthers figured that out later. That's when Elaine and Bobby began to run for office and develop Oakland, the breakfast programs, the survival programs. That's when they started winning. When they decided to park and develop Oakland, that's when the Panthers were at their high point. When they tried to lead Black America, that's when they failed. King talking, I have a dream, where is this crap? He talking dream, and Black Atlanta is thriving without integration. So, to me, the future of Black politics is Southern. The future of Black politics has to be local. It cannot be national. We are not a national population. And Du Bois said this. So we need to focus on, like Tip O'Neill said, all politics being local. We need to develop Black Oakland. We need to develop Black San Francisco. We need to develop Black Richmond. We need to develop at the local level in LA, Compton, everywhere we could both name. I think instead of this shotgun approach, trying to hit everything, take a rifle approach and just hit Oakland and focus on developing Oakland. And that's when the Panthers came around to understanding that if they could be a model or an example in their practice here, then others might duplicate it. And that to me is influenced that I think the Panthers wish they had done a different way. That what they should have done was develop the program, the civil Black. So what I'm saying is we have to invigorate Black civil society. That part of our lives that relate to public things that don't involve government per se, but the same areas of government, community life. And so for me, Black civil society is the church, it's the Greek fraternities and sororities, it's the 100 Black men of California, of America. It's, it's the Nation of Islam. It's, I don't want to give up on the Black churches. I don't think we should give up on the Black churches. I think there's a problem when Black people are constantly saying, we got all these Black churches, ain't nobody doing nothing. Our condition would be way worse if it wasn't for these Black churches that we have, the ones that aren't perfect. Imagine if we didn't have some of the Black churches giving people some kind of spiritual outlet to this madness.
Absolutely.
So it may not meet your needs, but if it's helping somebody in our Black community heal their minds, if they got to scream out the name of Jesus or Muhammad to be at peace with this we're dealing with, let them.
Right.
And we need to see the Black church as our institutions, and we need to convert the church. We need to convert the church to our understanding of its use in the Black community instead of the church converting us over to their Jesus. We need to convert the churches to serve Black people in the communities where they are. That means we need to get the pastors. So when you hear educating, you need to ask, any of y'all gonna be pastors? If anybody says, yes, I'm thinking about it, pull them aside and give them a special rendition of their obligation. But I think the key, Jason, for me is no more big ideas, local ideas, and make them strong and develop Black Oakland strong. Bring in the gangs, bring in the shot callers, bring in what Huey understood better than anybody else outside of Mao Zedong is that the gang and criminal element has to be brought in.
Right.
Because there's a thin line between the brother who's a gangster in Compton and the brother who's a gang affiliated in Compton.
Right.
Very thin.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out how to bring in our acceptable leaders and our underground leaders, and then come up with an organic solution that is almost black nationalist, but not hostile.
Gotcha.
Basically, we want to be left alone by white people. Leave us the hell alone. Yeah. And we want to develop black life in America without racism. And again, if there was somehow going to be a change in circumstances, and there will be in about 75 years with population, then I would make some other suggestions. But right now, under these circumstances, the local politics, to me, is the best form of black politics because it's more immediate. You can touch Oakland. You can touch the port. You can raise hell down at the Oakland port that they've brought in something like $30 billion a year, and Black Oakland don't get a penny of it. That's a politic we can do locally. And that's what the Panthers began to do, and that's what Robert Self and others, New Day in Babylon, the book talks about, is the way the Panthers began to target the ports.
Mm-hmm.
See, we got to stop with this fantasy black politics of freedom and understand the real solution are nuts and bolts, local issue politics.
Yeah. I really appreciate our time. We're moving to our last segment. Mm-hmm. You've said a lot, so much more to be unpacked. I want our listeners and our viewers to be mindful that this was one conversation, and we've only been here for about 55 minutes, but this conversation can go on because there's so much here, right? And we've covered a lot in this time. We move to this point of a moment of truth where, our guests get to share out, something that you feel like is most important for people to take away from this conversation. Yeah. What is that?
It is that reparations is being misrepresented. I love Ta-Nehisi Coates. I love the fact that his writing in these articles has brought reparations back. And Cobra, Amari Obadeli, others go way back on this issue. I want our audience to understand that the first black political issue ever after abolition was immediately reparations. We got distracted with integration. Our original politics was, y'all did this to us, fix it.
Right.
And we'll leave. We don't want to be with you. But somehow the Christian front, liberal integrationist aspect of Black America in the abolitionist movement ends up becoming the solution. We have to be together with our white brothers and sisters is what they took away from that rather than repair. So I'm saying to you that the reparations movement needs to understand that it was the original black politics, and nobody understands that. Nobody says that. Nobody else in America says that, that the original black politics was reparations. I'm saying that. Yeah. And it's proof with the 40 acres and the mule moment. But I want to say this finally, even more importantly, is reparations, and I said this on KPOO the other day, reparations is having the government on your side. And white folk have had reparations for 240 years in America. Right. That's what reparations ain't no damn check. Bernie Sanders and all of these, anybody who mentions a check, including the Addos people, about reparations is somebody who's reducing it to its least, its common denominator. Reparations is about an injury. Reparations is about fixing a demonic harm that was committed. And reparations is about, finally, the government, the entire government structure, the police, the banks, the insurance agencies, the school teachers, loan agents, people when you walk into Starbucks, every aspect of American existence. Yeah. Reparations is what white folk got right now. The government has been for them and with them the entire time. White people ain't great because they great. White people are great because the American government has been on their side only the whole damn time. Put the American government behind black people for 244 years and watch us excel. And then keep them down for 244 years while we thrive. And to see if white people don't become the niggas of America. That's the reality of reparations. Reparations niggerized us by staying behind, by the government supporting whites for 200 plus years. That is reparations.
Absolutely.
It ain't no damn check.
Give thanks. I'll add this piece. Black leadership is important. It must be cultivated. It is principle in our liberation, in our healing. We have to look to our young people. We have to look to the next generation to ensure that our livelihood is increased. We must be at the forefront, not white America. This is a moment of truth. Peace.
Nice. Cool. I had to get a little hyped up, man.